Hello everyone, this is the third and final installment of my Trails in the Sky trilogy video. I originally planned to release the trilogy video next, but after combining both my Twitter and YouTube polls, the majority wanted a standalone video for this game, so here it is. I will be making the full video down the line though, so keep an eye out for that. So before we dive into third, I once again have to add a spoiler disclaimer. This game is a direct sequel to Trails in the Sky second chapter, which was also a direct sequel to Trails in the Sky first chapter. Luckily I can talk about the story of this one without spoiling it too much, but since this game takes place directly after the last one, you might be spoiled on some playable characters, so once again play the games and come back if that matters to you. There are some really fun additions to your roster in this game, and I'm just looking out for you guys. If you would like to support videos like this, I have a KoFi down in the description. It's like Patreon, but I get paid much faster and has an easy to understand art commission system. You also get to view videos like this a whole week early if you want to, so go ahead and check it out. Anyway, let's move on. Trails in the Sky the Third is an interesting title. I mean literally, look at the title. It's not third chapter, it's the third. What is this, Kingdom Hearts? Oh god! Jokes aside, if you found yourself getting a bit burnt out exploring Liberl in the last two games, this game changes things up quite a bit. To begin, the main character shifts away from Estelle and Joshua, and instead focuses on Kevin and a new character named Reese as our new main characters. As I mentioned before, Kevin was introduced in the last game, and therefore we had a bit less time with him, but since he is now the main character, we get a lot more time to develop him in this game. However, this is actually one of the small ways in which this game decided to change things up. You see, if Sky first chapter and second chapter were originally meant to be one game, then Sky the Third is the post game. Now what do I mean by that? Well, the last couple games you spent exploring Liberl, however this game takes place in a pocket dimension of sorts. This pocket dimension, called Phantasma, sucks in Kevin and Reese at the start of the game, trapping them inside. Your goal? Escape the dimension. The story of this game is actually significantly simpler than the previous two games, and because of it taking place in a pocket dimension, there's a general sentiment towards this game being skippable. Now I personally do not agree with that, as this game does a lot to build up the world and set up later games, but I'll get into that in a bit. Now because of this setting, this game has more of a level-to-level structure, with each level constructed from places you had been to in the last couple games. Now you may be having Chain of Memories flashbacks if you played Kingdom Hearts, but this game still manages to feel like a normal Trails game for the most part. The combat is still very intact, though with some big additions and tweaks. There are no card game shenanigans to be seen, thank God. Now as you explore Phantasma, you will find party members from the previous games who have also been trapped inside, as well as several new playable characters that I won't spoil, but it's really neat. Now, since you don't have any towns to explore and you are not bracers this time around, you may be wondering what optional content there is in this game. Well, that's where the doors come in. There are 25 doors, each of them providing a variety of optional content. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that most of this game's content lies in these doors. Most doors are side stories that exist anywhere on the Trails timeline leading up to when Third begins. They essentially serve almost as slice-of-life filler episodes where you get a deeper exploration of the characters and their past. Other doors might give you some additional lore about the Trails universe, such as the Salt Pail incident, while other doors might include minigames that vary from entertaining to pain. This game also uses the doors to subtly set up events in the following Crossbell and Erebonia arcs. Now if you really like the towns in the previous games, a fun trait of this game is that your ever-growing party of characters are always hanging out back at the base, and you can get a lot of really fun scenes with everyone if you choose to backtrack. Also during select doors, you do get to explore towns and stuff, so it's not like that is completely absent in this game. Now in regards to the story, despite its unconventional setting, it actually manages to be really good, especially once you hit the last act and everything comes together. Now, most of the story's runtime is pretty minimal if you ignore the doors and mostly serves to set up the third act, but when you hit that point, this game is possibly the peak of the entire Sky trilogy. Kevin's character quickly goes from a quirky member of the cast to one of the best characters in the series. Legit, this man had a bummer of a life, and the way the game goes about depicting his emotions is really creative and well done. At the start of every chapter, you get a flashback of Kevin's past where a lot of mystery and intrigue is, and while he's not my personal favorite main character, he's definitely a complex one, and I love that. Then there's Reese, who despite being an entirely new character in this game, quickly became one of my favorites. She's pretty cute, loves food a lot, and I do mean a lot, while also being kind of an anchor for Kevin. Now the surrounding cast doesn't really get that much extra development in the main narrative itself, as they want you to go through the doors for that, but given that this is following up on 2 games with this cast, I think that is perfectly fine. I've seen some people take issue with how simple this narrative is compared to the rest of the series, and I understand that, but as I'll thoroughly make clear by the end of this video, this game is kind of a different beast. The side content is absolutely a part of the narrative this time as far as I'm concerned, and the game really does flesh out whatever loose ends it can, while also being very emotional. Also, this game is probably one of the darkest games in the series and really handles many of its subject matter seriously and with care. But there's also a lot of levity too. I think if you are into emotion-driven narratives, this game is definitely for you. In regards to the gameplay, the foundation is the same as Sky's second chapter, but there's a lot more meat to the combat this time. This game's major selling point is that every playable character from the last couple games return, as well as a few newcomers. Because of this, third is easily the Sky game with the most freedom from a gameplay perspective. Something that is somewhat better in this game is the character management. Like second chapter, you can only swap characters back at the base. However, unlike previous games, you can fast travel in this game, which largely makes this a non-issue. On top of that, you can freely manage everyone's equipment and quartz when at the base without swapping them in, which makes things a lot more convenient. That said, I really wish you could also manage this stuff while in the dungeons themselves, but this is nonetheless a huge improvement on second chapter, so I'll give it a pass. As for the orb mint, it's basically the same as at the end of the last game, though your quartz are all mysteriously broken at the start of this game, so you'll have to start from scratch once again, including the slots. Which might be the most contrived way I've ever seen these games start you from zero, but hey, is what it is, I guess. I actually found the process of managing my quartz a lot more involved in this game due to the much larger cast, as I found myself constantly unequipping stuff to equip onto my exploring 4 characters for the chapter, which did get old at points, but I still appreciated the customization in this game. Also, this game allows you to transfer your save data once again, but because of this game's structure, your rewards for doing so aren't quite as good this time. You transfer your levels and get an admittedly good accessory early on for getting an A rank bracer status in second chapter, but aside from that, you don't really get much, which may be disappointing, but it is amusing that you start the game around level 90 this time. It's fun seeing that progression. Now, one of my favorite additions is the support effect feature. While exploring in dungeons, you can select a character from the map screen to add some modifiers to your party's stats. These passives are excellent, though I definitely use some characters more than others. Some will increase the rate of Sepith gain, some will increase stats, some will increase your EXP gain, and some will increase your drop rate for items. It's just a nice system. A small problem I have with this game though is that your party in the back does not level up unless you bring them, far as I know, and with the cast this large it means sometimes you'll have some stragglers, which is why the EXP bonuses are a very welcome addition, though it can feel kind of like a band-aid solution to the problem, when I think it just would have been better to level up your back party members when you don't bring them to the front. Now for the combat. In this dimension, the higher elements are present. If you are familiar with later Trails games, you know what this means, but for those of you who don't, allow me to explain. Basically, this entire game, there are some extra bonuses on the turn wheel, and they add much more to the game in the way of strategy. Let's go ahead and break down some of these. First is Nullify, which can be good or bad depending on the situation. Basically, any damage done on one of these turns will be nullified, so ideally you want this to land on enemy turns and not on yours. But whenever I got it, I basically just used the opportunity to heal or wait since you get less of a turn penalty for doing so. It's kind of annoying when that happens, but it's not the worst. Then there's the double action one, which actually becomes a mainstay in the following games. This one gives you an immediate action the next turn, which also applies to spells allowing you to instant cast. And then there's my personal favorite, the death turns, which allow you to instantly kill most enemies without fail with a melee attack that turn. Now this also works for enemies, so you want to try and keep them from getting it wherever possible, but I love getting it, and it's just a lot of fun. And then there's Vanish. Vanish sucks. Basically, whenever an attack is dealt on a Vanish turn, the opponent disappears from the fight for around 3 turns. This applies both for enemies and for you. And if your entire party is hit with Vanish, that's a game over. The most annoying part is that if your character gets vanished, they lose all of their MP. On the flip side, if an opponent's entire party gets vanished, you get a victory, but you do not get any experience for it. Overall, not really a fan of this one. Vanish aside, all of these additions require you to pay way more attention to the bonuses and add some fun chaos to Third's battles compared to the previous 2 games. Outside of the turn bonuses, there were some spells in previous games that existed outside of the weakness typing, but with the higher elements present, you now have them as additional weakness options to pay attention to, which is pretty neat. To talk about balance for a second, this game is basically designed for Sky superfans, meaning that a lot of the wacky balance I enjoyed in SC is now a lot more rigid. Now I did play on hard for this game, so that might be part of it, but I did feel like this game handles the balance of arts versus crafts the best out of the entire trilogy. It also taught me to rely on tactics outside of my usual strats for this series, and I really enjoyed myself. Overall, I'm sure I've made it abundantly clear how much I love the combat in this series, with this game pushing me to my limits in particular, and I really had a lot of fun with it, and I really hope you guys do too if you decide to play the games. Overall, this game was a lot of fun, and I cannot recommend it enough. Now it's time for a change of pace. Let's talk about the doors.
Hello, Ed boys. Any doors, yes? Too much? Or couch potato Ed boys like yourself?
The doors are where the bulk of this game's content takes place. They are very worth doing as you actually get lots of really good rewards from them, such as money, quartz, and equipment. There are a total of 25 doors in the game with 3 categories for each of them. Long-term story doors known as moon doors, short-term story doors known as star doors, and minigame doors known as sun doors. Once you've done every single door in the game, you are able to view one last door with a teaser of what's to come. Let's start with the moon doors because that's what the game does. These doors are probably some of my favorites, but they are really long. Early into the game, the first door you encounter is basically an hour straight of cutscenes, and that basically sets the tone for what I mean. Some of these doors have gameplay, some do not. Some let you explore, some are a gauntlet of cutscenes. And then some doors be like,
Dragon Tales, it's almost time for Dragon Tales. Come along, take my hand, let's all go to Dragonland.
Jokes aside, I think your mileage with these doors will largely depend on how invested you already are in the Sky universe, which if you played the first 2 is likely to be high, but I feel I need to mention that anyway. Personally, I think they're great, but I could see someone being annoyed that it might be taking them away from the main part of the game that they like. I think the worst of it was in my original playthrough when I did Chloe's door and had it take 2 hours to finish. I'm looking at you, Lecter! This door gave Chloe a lot of great backstory, but also gave us Lecter a rundell with the most intentionally annoying introduction they could possibly give this man. He is a master at wasting my time. Back in the day, this was one of the last doors I had to do, and half of it was checking random areas looking for this slacker, and I was not a fan. But this time around, I actually like this door a lot. Best advice I can give for this entire series, and particularly for this door, is don't try to blitz it. Take your time. There is a lot of nuance in all of these Trails games, and you'll appreciate later reveals better with this mindset. The short-term doors, also known as star doors, are a bit more all over the place. Allow me to explain. Some doors are basically small 20-minute filler episodes to flesh out characters you didn't have much time with before, and I like these a lot and kind of wish they could have trimmed down a few of the longer doors to be more like these. The others are lore doors. So these ones I found very fascinating, especially the Salt Pail one. You really get to explore and learn a lot about places outside of Liberl in these, and a lot of this becomes relevant in later games, which is crazy. But admittedly, most of the lore doors are just a bunch of text to read, and I found all of them fascinating on different levels, but I imagine they may not do anything for some people. And then there's this door. Alright, so I mentioned there being really dark material, and that's mostly one door. This door portrays a backstory that is, pretty messed up, in a way the Trails doesn't normally do. For what it is, it's well written and really makes you understand a certain character, but just be warned, it's definitely sensitive material. Now we have the minigame doors, known as sun doors. Oh boy, there are 5 of these doors, and my opinions of them are a tad all over the place too. There's a shooter minigame that has terrible controls, a quiz show with Campanella that is pretty amusing, a blackjack and poker door, and lastly, an arena. The arena is probably my favorite of these doors since you really get to test your skills with the combat with some pretty crazy fight matchups. This also contains probably one of the most brutal fights at its highest difficulty that I won't share for spoiler reasons, but hey, if you wanted a super boss for the Sky trilogy, here you go. Now, a few of the doors in this game will have additional parts that will require you to bring certain characters or items, such as the arena, so try to keep an eye out for that. Now, I think my favorite thing about the minigame doors is that they have these really quirky artworks that parody other games and anime. Like, look over here, it's Puyo Puyo. Oh no!
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
The fishing door. So basically, as Estelle, you have to challenge these fishermen in a battle royale of sorts. Meanwhile, you're stuck in the hell that is this minigame. Everything is RNG, I feel death, why must I be here, Nihon Falcom? It has been weeks, I'm starving, and no, I am not going to eat the fish! This fishing minigame is kind of infamous. Remember what I said about the fishing last game and how it works? Well, this is the game where you have to get good. To win, you have to score more points than the opponent. The larger the fish, the larger points you obtain. On paper, there's definitely an element of skill to this, but there's also a lot of RNG and a lot of BS. You can have your opponent get extremely lucky, and all you can do is just play the best you can. In the last round, if luck is not on your side, you are just going to lose no matter how good you are. It is a huge time sink. But you know, considering later games would expand on the fishing and make larger quests involving them, it is a very good boot camp for what comes later. I guess that's a compliment, is what I would say before I replay this. So, I got in a call with some friends while I did this minigame because I thought it'd be funny and some shenanigans went down. Oh, come on. Oh, is it the exclamation mark this time? Did they actually fix it?
I don't think you're understanding the gravity of this situation again. This is much better than second chapter.
Fun fact, the fish you obtain is not actually luck-based, but rather is based on your timing with pressing the button. Timing that is very, very, very precise. I had to look up how to do this because the last round I just wasn't catching fish, and there was advice like turning the music down in the settings to hear the beep. It's all RNG, and the funniest one, spam the confirm button at first, and slowly lower the rate of pressing the button until you get one. Fun fact, the latter was actually the most accurate one. And then once you think you're in the clear, you then stop doing that, and then you press it every second.
Sounds convoluted.
Here's an easy way to win this minigame that I have managed to dub the Mississippi strategy. Yes, I'm about to explain an exploit that I discovered. So because the devs want you to time your button press, if you press it early, it resets the timer for the exclamation mark to appear. So basically you mash until you think it's reset, then you count Mississippis and press the button every Mississippi. You will win provided luck is on your side. Oh, Mr. Fishing Baron, huh? Not looking so good over there. I'm gonna regret doing this, but man, look at you with your measly 500 points while I have 1,700. There's no way you could win this. Please don't prove me wrong. I would be very embarrassed.
Just quietly hear from underneath his Japanese voice actor.
One Mississippi, two Mississippi.
This minigame is awful, but hey, maybe this really funny strategy will save you some headache. As a positive, the music for this minigame is pretty darn cute, but after being in this minigame hell for so long, it triggers a fight or flight response in me. On the topic of the soundtrack, I love it. Now, Chapter 2 of this game had me kind of concerned as I feel a lot of the area themes in this go for more of an ethereal vibe, but this is probably one of my favorite soundtracks in the whole series after revisiting this game. First, the battle themes in this have gone in a bit of a different direction from the last two games in a way I really dig. There's the main battle theme which takes that ethereal approach to the jazzy style of the previous games, adding reverb, synth, and other stuff to make a really cool sound. Then there's Fighting Right On, continuing the hard rock edge from last game. And Overdosing Heavenly Bliss, which sounds a lot like something from Final Fantasy XIII. But also the area themes in this game are a lot more energetic and creative to complement the more level-to-level structure, just making the game feel fun to play. I also really like the theme song of this game, Cry For Me, Cry For You. It is such a cheesy title, but I think it is my personal favorite opening of the Sky trilogy. It's really good and reminds me of Chrono Crusade for the two of you who have seen that show. I also want to shout out that some of the music in this really tugs at your emotional heartstrings. There were instances where I just had to take a moment because the narrative and music worked together to just kind of break me. This game also has one of my favorite final boss themes of all time, only topped by a different trail song later on. Overall, I love this soundtrack so much and it definitely deserves a listen. There is a common idea that because of how weird and isolated this game is at surface value, that it's totally skippable. It's a sentiment I understand because this is a series with 9 games and counting, and shaving off what you can sounds really appealing. But if you ask me, especially if you are a fan of the world and characters of the Sky series, you should not skip this game. This game is very important, especially to emotional beats in later games. Is it weird? Sure. Is it my favorite? Not really, but I also know several people who say it is their favorite, and with the power of hindsight, I totally understand. This game used to rank pretty low for me when I first played it, but over the years I've kind of realized I've been a bit harsh to it, and in a lot of ways I actually appreciate it a lot because of how much this game sets up. This game pretty much sets up every single game after this that I'm going to be talking about in this retrospective, and it's actually kind of insane because most of it you won't even realize until you run into it later, and I find that really cool. And believe me, you might find your favorite Trails game here. It's very good. Because what this game gets right is some of the best stuff in the series. I think what this game does best is being a send-off to the cast of the Sky trilogy. You get to play as everyone, see them all interact, and learn more about them. You get to build everyone how you want and get a victory lap with all of these characters you spent 2 games with. Third is a love letter to Liberl and its characters that manages to end off on just as much of an emotional high as the previous game, which really impresses me. I know I said this about the last game, but they got me crying again! Which just shows how attached I got to this cast. This game works as an excellent bookend and send-off for all of these characters you spent hundreds of hours with up to this point, while telling a very deep and emotional narrative about Kevin and Reese, and even setting up 2 of the major arcs after this, which is an incredibly impressive feat. I think if we were to rank these games strictly on gameplay, this is probably one of the best games in the whole series. I definitely recommend this game, especially if you are a fan of Sky's characters. It is a creative and emotional ending to the most character-focused arc in the Trails series. Third is not my personal favorite Trails, but I know it is for a lot of people. It is a great game, and you definitely should not skip it. And with that, here we are at the end of the Sky trilogy. Revisiting this entire saga has definitely been a bit of a trip. Trails in the Sky first chapter started a saga, and because of that it was a rough beginning in regards to gameplay, but it did its job really well in terms of setting the foundation for later games, and making you care about its characters. Getting to witness a few friends playing first chapter as their first Trails, I gained a lot of appreciation for its narrative this time around. Second chapter was a masterpiece that completely stole my heart for a second time replaying it. I gained a newfound appreciation for the way it improved the combat from FC, while managing to really tie in the pacing in a way that kept me engaged with very little annoying me overall. Sky the Third is a subversive, if not messy, conclusion to this trilogy, managing to completely ditch the formula, tightening the gameplay experience, and putting a nice bow on a story, characters, and setting that really mean a lot to me. These are games with a lot of heart, containing a cute love story at its core, and a plot and setting that feels incredibly creative. This was the beginning of the most fleshed out world that I have experienced in any RPG, and Liberl as a setting is something that I will always hold dear. Because of that, I seriously want to thank XSEED for their work in localizing these games. I didn't touch on this, but they poured their heart out in the localization and went through hell getting second chapter to release. Without them, Trails may have stayed in Japan and I never would have played these games. Third was released in the West well into the Cold Steel games getting localized, and it was the last Trails game they got to handle. At the end of Third, you can read the chest cheering you on and thanking you for playing their games, and as dumb as it was, it did bring a tear to my eye playing it. I want to thank them so much for helping bring this series into my life. They did an excellent job and their chest message joke was so good that I honestly really miss it in the newer games. I know I'm being incredibly sappy here, but these games do legitimately mean a lot to me. I found these games at the tail end of a really dark period of my life and it was something that I really needed at the time. Now this probably makes me sound biased since I can admit that these games did provide me an important source of escape, that much is true, but I think these games gave me a sense of childlike joy a jaded person like myself has not gotten from a series in a long time. If this video convinced you to give Trails a shot, I do really hope you'll have a really fun time. I think the main thing that I would say about this series is that you get back what you put into it. There's an insane amount of detail put into the world building, NPCs, characters, and story that only continue to reward you as you go through the games. I think my friend Blaze, who recently played the game for the first time, said it best, so I'll go ahead and let them take it away.
Like I said a couple of times in this review, there is a huge payoff at the end. Pay attention to everything. Everything matters in this game. Your time is not wasted in this JRPG whatsoever.
This is very much the MCU of JRPG, so it can be daunting, but it's something I don't regret diving into for a single second. I love this trilogy with all of my heart, and the crazy thing is, I'm hyped to replay the rest of the series. This video has already ended up being the longest review I've ever done, and that honestly terrifies me considering some of the later games. For the next part of this retrospective, I'm working out when to make it for a number of reasons. We'll be looking at games that were trapped in Japan for years, got a fan translation, and now that translation is going to be the basis of an official release. That's right everyone, next time we're going to be going into the Crossbell arc with Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure. These two games are some of my favorite games in the entire Trails series, and I originally played them via the Geofront fan translation, and I'm really excited to talk about them next time, but since Azure will be releasing next year via NIS, I actually will not be getting the full video out until both NIS releases are finished. I know, I'm sorry about that, but that's just how this is going to be. Now that said, I am absolutely excited to really share my thoughts on these games. They're really fun, and in general, I'm also thinking of releasing Zero standalone. That way you guys can experience it kind of like I did with first chapter and second chapter, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm also considering doing streams of Zero. If you guys are interested, go ahead and comment down below if you guys would like to see that. I think that'd be a lot of fun, and I just kind of want to gauge some interest on that. I also want to give thanks to my good friend Snive who edited the transitions for me in this video. You can check out his channel in the description. He does GMVs, RPG news, and Let's Plays. I am really proud of how these transitions turned out, in particular SC's, which I had this joke in mind and he really managed to put it together, and I think it's a lot of fun, and I'm really happy that he did it. I also want to give a huge thanks to my friends Studios, Blaze, Dorman, KingdomAce, Notley, as well as my KoFi supporters, who all helped contribute to this video in different ways. Seriously, you guys helped a lot, and I don't think this video would be as good as it is without your input, so again, thank you guys so much. That said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Next time we're going to be getting over that language barrier, so I'll see you guys next time, and take care. Bye.
Side